Firstly, I'd like to invite the government team to CUDS. CUDS, please come up to the stage. Next, I'd like to invite the opposition, Love Sexy Republicans. Love Sexy Republicans, please come up to the stage. So lastly, I'd like to introduce the honorable judges for the grand final 22nd ICUT tournament. On the panel, we have, in no particular order, Shunichi Arai, Sandeep. Okay. Then next, we have Sandeep Shirani. And also we have Robin Teo. We have Kowa Nikura. We have Taeyeong Kim. And we have Max Gura. And we have Dan Moden. And as the last member of the panel, we have Anthony Chen. And for the chair of this grand final, we have Keita Takayanagi, who is the chief adjudicator of this tournament, 22nd. So the motion for the grand final is, this house believes that if the end of the world is coming, without a hope of survival, government should keep it secret from society. Without any further ado, I'd like to call upon Prime Minister Taeyeong Kim.
Mr. Chair, as a representative of not CUDS, but of Korea in a Japanese tournament, we are proud to say that we are here to propose today's motion. We're going to contextualize this debate in a very fair manner. We're going to contextualize this debate on the get-go. We're going to case this situation in a case scenario where a meteorite or an asteroid is about to hit the Earth, right? So the United States of America or any high-ranking official knows that this asteroid is on its way to destroy Earth. There's absolutely no hope of survival. There's absolutely no situation in where the human race can survive if that asteroid hits the Earth. The question of today's debate is whether the government's responsibility is to allow the people to understand this information and use this information not necessarily in the most benefit means, but rather is it the government's responsibility to allow and foretell this information so that overall society and happiness can be calculated so that everyone can flourish their individuality before their final moments, right? So our model is necessarily going to be that the high-ranking officials of the government is going to know. People like the president, people like the Joint Chief of Staffs, right? But we're not going to disclose this information to normal citizens existing in today's world. We're not going to disclose it to people like the police members of a government, not to people like firemen or whatnot. This is only going to be the high-ranking officials. We're only going to disclose it to those individuals, and they're going to use that information to the best means possible. But Mr. Speaker, we believe that there are going to be two case scenarios once we don't disclose this information. The first case scenario is that the meteorite actually hits the Earth. And we believe that it is going to be okay, because under our case scenario, we are able to not disclose this information and allow people to flourish their individuality and flourish their own productive lives, and therefore we don't necessarily think that that's going to be a problem. But second of all, we also believe in the case scenario where it is not necessarily true, right? To some extent, we don't necessarily think that this calculation is going to be 100% accurate. In some instances, there are going to be instances where this calculation is not true, and therefore there is hope that these people can actually survive. But we don't necessarily think that this is a good situation, Mr. Speaker, because fundamentally people are unable to come back to society after that chaos, after that chaotic time, and where they thought that they were going to die. We believe that that context is very clear. I'm going to prove to you several things in my speech today. I'm going to first talk to you about the most classic argument about what is the responsibility of a government, and why in this particular scenario, why this government has a responsibility to like basically make this information secret. I'm also going to talk to you upon why social order will not be fulfilled in a context in where this information is like basically like distributed, and therefore why this does not bring the happy life of these individuals within that society. So without any further ado, let's go into my first argument about what is the responsibility of a government. The overall notion that we want to promote on the government side is that the government has a duty to maximize the happiness, safety, and security of all individuals living within their own country. We can see a lot of case examples in where governments actually disclose or does not disclose the information that is going against the national security of this country, right? Things such as army tactics, things such as terrorism. We do not disclose this information to the overall public because we believe that social order is not going to be fulfilled and overall society isn't necessarily going to be in a happy state, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, based upon this idea, we believe that the government has a fundamental right and an obligation to restrict this information for the overall happiness of society. Then comes into one of the most crucial questions upon why social order will not be fulfilled, Mr. Speaker. And we believe that there are a lot of reasons why social order will not be fulfilled. No, thank you, sir. We believe in a context in a world where human beings are not necessarily perfect. We don't necessarily think that all individuals are able to handle this type of information. We believe on the government side only a limited amount of people can handle this information. Say, for example, there's also a terminally ill person, but how doctors react to that terminally ill person was that they disclose and give the information that this person is going to die in a short period of time, not necessarily to the patient, but also to the family members, because the family members are in the best position to adjudicate whether we should disclose this information or not, right? But we don't necessarily think that once this information is distributed to everyone in society, that everyone is going to react in the best means possible, Mr. Speaker, right? So we don't necessarily think that normal people can spend that meaningful of time, because normally, when you spend time knowing the fact that you're about to die is normally upon the idea that you want to share memories with your family. You want to share memories with members of society. But that's not going to be under the case scenario when a meteorite or asteroid hits the Earth, necessarily because everyone is going to die, Mr. Speaker. If that's the case scenario, we don't think that normal people are able to force their individuality and use that time in the most meaningful possible, right? Another notion that we want to promote on the government side is that the right to know, the right for information is only important in a situation in where you can use that information that you gain from that idea and make better educated decisions in the far future. However, in the case scenario of today's motion, the future is not going to be guaranteed because a meteorite is going to slaughter everyone and basically make everyone unhappy, Mr. Speaker. And if that's the case, we don't necessarily think that your information used in the future can be necessarily good in that society. Yes, sir.
Why is it possible for the state to make a calculus about the people's reaction, even though the reaction of people will be subjective? Why you can say people can't utilize those information in the first place?
Thank you for that POI, because that is directly going to my next argument. Thank you for my structure opposition with. That comes to my second argument about what kind of social disorder is going to occur under this kind of scenario, right? Because fundamentally, we believe that people will be unable to live a happy and a productive life. Totally disregarding the fact that there's obviously going to be situations of crime, there's obviously going to be situations of chaos, Mr. Speaker. But we believe, and the more important thing, Mr. Speaker, is that we concede. On government side, we concede that some people are going to live happy lives. We concede that these people are going to use this information for the overall production of that society. But we believe that the moment this information is distributed to everyone, even those people are going to lose out and going to have their right to live a happy life to be deterred for three main reasons. The overall reason is because obviously there are people who are going to use that information for their benefits, but there are also going to be people who commit crime, who commit chaos. So the people who want to live happy lives are also going to be influenced by the people who create crime, Mr. Speaker. Obviously, this is harming their right to have happiness to begin with. But second of all, we also believe that they are under the fear and under the threat of imminent death, Mr. Speaker. Obviously, this very fact that I'm going to die in several days or several weeks is going to terrorize these individuals. So we have to expand our idea of happiness and not only talk about whether I can eat a hamburger, but it's also about the quality of life and how I make my calculations in the far future. We believe that this idea is a fundamentally idea. But third of all, we also believe that the government system is not going to work under the case scenario where we have information. Why is that? Because obviously government workers or government police doesn't have any incentive to protect the society. Why? Because even if I work so much hard, and even if I work hard, obviously I'm going to die at the end of the day. Therefore, we don't necessarily think that police won't be able to protect anyway. There's going to be less protection. So fundamentally, they are unable to protect the innocent people that's going to be influenced under that crime. That's also the instances of places such as prisons, where obviously guards are going to basically use their time to flourish their individuality. And if that's the case, obviously prisons are going to come out, criminals are going to come out, and that's going to disturb the chaos and disturb the situation of society. And if that's the case, the happiness is influenced upon every single individual in the society. And for the happiness of the people, and for happiness of the Korean people, as well as the Japanese people, we are supremely proud to propose.
Thank you for Taeyeong Kim for his Prime Minister's speech. Just one notice, since of the battery problem, we only have one mic for both teams, so we kind of have to do weird things, but please get used to it. So, anyway, from the opposition, without any further ado, from the opposition, I'd like to call upon Leader of Opposition, Ryotaro Tanaka.
Mr. Speaker, we on this side of the opposition believe that people have right. We on this side of the opposition believe that people have right to decide how they end their life, how they end their life when the war is about to end, Mr. Speaker. People have right to know the war is going to end, and people have right to decide how they are going to utilize their last time. For example, some people might want to pray before a meteor strike happen, or some people want to spend last time with their loved one or family member, Mr. Speaker. Really, the government does not have any justification to hide these kind of information from citizens, because citizens will be deprived of opportunity to know and prepare for the last time to prepare, Mr. Speaker. That is extremely problematic, and we are very proud to oppose this motion. So what I'm going to do is very simple. I'm going to explain why government should not destroy the information. I have 4 reasons. But before that, let me refute what the previous speaker said. The previous speaker said, well, the primary reason why the government should not destroy the information is because there will be chaotic situation, like social order will be disrupted. They provide 3 reasons: crime, and fear, and police will not function. I'm going to deal with crime later, but let me deal with that here, Mr. Speaker. Yes, Mr. Speaker, we agree that some people will fear, but we never know, Mr. Speaker, what kind of reaction that the individual member of society will have toward this kind of information, right? It's highly subjective. Some people might fear, but some people might want to utilize this time as a way to pray for the God because they believe in the life after death, Mr. Speaker. It is highly subjective, and the government do not have justification to make this sweeping generalization that everybody fear, therefore it should be better for individuals not to know, Mr. Speaker. That is fundamentally wrong. Secondly, they say police will never ever function. As a consequence, social order will never ever be retained. Mr. Speaker, we on the side of government, believe that police are much more disciplined, Mr. Speaker. In the case of, for example, what happened after the earthquake of Japan, Mr. Speaker, many self-defense force staff went to Tohoku despite the fact there was a massive risk to their life, Mr. Speaker. Many people died as a result of attempting to rescue many people. Yet, Mr. Speaker, because of this massive fear, these self-defense force bravely went in these kind of regions and protected many people, Mr. Speaker. We believe even under there is fear. We believe that military and self-defense force are capable of functioning, Mr. Speaker. Now about crime, we believe that crime will not happen, Mr. Speaker, because first of all, Mr. Speaker, we believe their argument is factually untrue. Let's think about the case of Cuban Missile Crisis, Mr. Speaker. Eventually, in the case of Cuban Missile Crisis, the information that nuclear war was about to happen was disclosed to the public. like nuclear war being started basically mean at that time the end of the war. But Mr. Speaker, the action of people was different from what they characterize.
So-
Mr. Speaker, people calmly deal with this kind of situation. They spend time with their family member and loved one. They calmly deal with that kind of
So-
situation. We believe the majority of people are not as like stupid or like kind of evil
So-
as they have yesterday. We believe in the consciousness of human being, Mr. Speaker, more. And second of all, Mr. Speaker, the reason why there might be some like people who, and more, Mr. Speaker, the difference. Even the criminal gang probably will have an incentive to, probably behave goodly, Mr. Speaker, because the reason why people commit a crime, in the time of chaotic situation, such as like after earthquake, is because they can continue to retain the benefit of crime, like forever, right? The reason why there are some like criminal gangs which are stealing things in Tohoku region after the earthquake was because they can continue to retain that benefit for a long time. But on this scenario, the world will end coming, and we don't really think that these criminal gangs will have an incentive to do such kind of things. Rather, these criminal gangs will be more likely to incline to like reflect what they have done and pray for the God, especially when they are religious. Now, moving on to my point, which is about why the government do not have any justification. But before that.
In the Cuban Missile Crisis, hope existed of compromise. Under our motion, hope is non-existent. Read the motion.
Well, even if hope existed, but in the case of Cuban Missile Crisis, but you admitted there is a hope even under your model, right? In your plan. So please explain later, Mr. Speaker. No, moving on to first justification, like government. But we believe that, Mr. Speaker, the government does not exist for the sake of government, right, Mr. Speaker? The reason why the government exists is for the sake of citizens, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, it is extremely wrong for the government to actively hide information from the citizen, Mr. Speaker. Yes, we agree that in some circumstances, government sometimes hide secret information from public, such as military strategy or information about terrorists or diplomatic issue, Mr. Speaker. It is true, but the reason why the government does this kind of thing sometimes is because there is assumption of state continuity, right, Mr. Speaker? The reason why the government do not disclose military information or terrorist information is because if by disclosing it, the greater harm will materialize in the future, right? If we disclose the information about terrorist military strategy, maybe 10 years later, this America can be attacked by other nations. So there is a presumption of their example is a state continuity, but under this model, this presumption does not exist. State will not continue, Mr. Speaker. Or even in the case of doctor not informing patient who are cancer, Mr. Speaker, there is still the reason why that is the case is because there's a presumption of continuity of patient life, Mr. Speaker. The reason why doctors do not disclose the information to the patient is because by disclosing such kind of information to the patient, patient is more likely to die. So underlying assumption here is that there is possibility of patient continuity of life, Mr. Speaker. So, but under this model, that kind of assumption does not exist because there is no state continuity in this scenario. Now, second reason why we believe that government should not disclose is because government should not make this sweeping generalization that every single individual will fear, or it is better for every single sweeping generalization that it is better for every single citizen not to know about it, Mr. Speaker. We believe that this, as I've said, reaction to that kind of information is extremely subjective. Some citizens might not like it, some citizens like it, Mr. Speaker. But Mr. Speaker, it should be up to the citizen, member of society, to decide, so the government should not make that kind of sweeping generation, and that is extremely important. Now, final issue is about probably in majority of cases, citizens will like to know that kind of information because probably citizens want to spend their last time with their family member or loved one, or citizens might not want to do something that they really love, Mr. Speaker. In the case of me, I want to die debating, right, Mr. Speaker? So, for some people might want to pray for the God before meteor strike, right, Mr. Speaker? So in majority of cases, Mr. Speaker, the government can make this assumption the majority of people want to know before meteor strike die. Under their model, the citizen is going to die without being able to spend their last time with family member or friend. That is extremely problematic. Final idea is extremely, so for this reason, Mr. Speaker, we believe that state exists for the sake of citizens, and state should not make this sweeping generalization that it is better for citizens not to know. And for this reason, Mr. Speaker, we are very proud to oppose this motion.
Thank you, Ryotaro Tanaka, for his speech. Now from the government, I'd like to call upon Deputy Prime Minister Namchul Kim.
Mr. Speaker, I think we got great consensus coming from oppositions, right? In the case of maybe social order is going to be destructive, like the case of, terrorists, like the case of maybe one guy putting a bomb under your chair right now. Government doesn't have to disclose this information. Why? Because it might, have the problems of the social order of the society, right? That is exactly the same. That might be different. Maybe half of the people just sit down there, call the police. Maybe half of the people are crazy and going out there and people hitting each other and jumping on you and hit and hurt. Maybe this is subjective too. But you just said it is okay to not disclose this information, right? Yes, like you said. So I think it's a great consensus coming from that. With that, I have three questions into this debate. First, what is the responsibility of the government? Second, what about the people who want to share their life last moment with their family? He said he want to debate. No, I'm going to see my family. The third idea is why in the status quo, right to know is important. So why in the case of this, assuming that the thing is happening, then why this is not important? Okay, first argument, responsibility of the government, right? We think we are living in a society where we have a contract with the government. We said, even if I want to know a lot of stuff, if that information harms the social order, you can, block the information coming from me, right? That is the case of bomb situations, right? We don't disclose it because maybe society is going to be crazy. People running around and people hurt each other, right? That is why in terms of a social contract, government shouldn't have to disclose these information, right? We said until you die, even if you die, until government is going to disappear, that social contract is not going to disappear.
Why?
Then they said it is very subjective, right? Some people are crazy, some people is not crazy. But I said it is the same as bomb situation. But we don't want to have a gamble. Because last moment, because some people subjectively adapt to the society, some people don't. I don't want to make a gamble and society crazy about, and your last moment is going to be harmed by that crazy people. Second, they said religious people, they will pray for their God, right? These people is going to be harmed. The criminals and people crazy. The words explained by Taeyeong, no response. But I don't think religion people is going to be happy. Why? Because world is end without God. Because stupid stone is ending world. It's not going to be happy. Third, they said policemen, right? I think that's a totally different situation. Policemen in the Japanese cases, I was very touched because I see from the TV. They do that because they are not making a legacy, right? Because this is a society your children must live in. This is a society your family must live in. Maybe 100 years later, some people recognize me because I sacrifice myself to keep an order in this society. But in this situation, it's not going to be happen because maybe 90% going 9999%, world is going to die. And they talked about Cuban situation, we didn't PY. Then he gave a cute response, right? It was a cute response. But you said there might be hope. You said it's not going to likely happening right now. You are not going to say to the citizen, maybe the 0.1% you will survive. That's why you must keep in order and you must sit there. I don't think that is going to happen. There's a totally different situation. Second, then what is going to happen? Reaction from the people, right? We clearly give you the ideas. We think people are keeping their role in the society because there are two reasons why. First, this is a society you are living in. You have motivations to keep it this order and motivations flourish based on this society, right? But in the government situation, it's not going to happen. Second, you are afraid of punishment, right? If I hit you and policeman is hit me and I'm sitting in the prisons, but I want to see my girlfriend and mommy, I can. That punishment makes deter people making a punishment. But under your policy, there is no punishment, right? Because if I'm the policeman and I have to die, and I said, okay, I'm going to see my girlfriend, bye-bye, prison cell, I opened it, right? Then there's no one can keep the orders. Then people will go out and riding on the street and they will do whatever they want. He want to do, but he couldn't do because he afraid of punishment or social order, right? That is why there will be likely crimes after this point. Then they talk about there's a lot of people who want to share time with their family. I agree with that. There's a lot of brave people, even if they have a cancers, they want to share their time with their family in the meaningful way. But I think it's totally different situation. First, They are trying to do that not because of them, but because they want to provide a really nice memory to their families, right? That is why that memory makes that time really meaningful and experience moment. But under our policy, there isn't. But like I said before, those people is going to violate and be turned by crazy people on the street. If I'm having a really nice time with my family, someone throw the stone on my window. Don't do that. Come up the street making a society stupid because we are going to be dying. Those people violate that nice and meaningful moment. And thirdly and finally, those people is going to be troubled by the ideas they will die. I don't think within that moment they can have a happy life. Yes, anybody?
Okay, when the war is ending, don't you think even the criminal gang will have an incentive to spend the last time with his family member or
This might be a situation. But the problem is there's a lot of criminals who don't have a families who want to turn It's true. We always talk about punishment, criminal justice system. This is a reason why people making a friends, right? There will be a people like that. But like you said, it is very subjective. Not all people like kind or to us. Maybe they hate their mommy. Maybe they hate their boss. That is why I want to kill him before I die. Maybe that mentality will be there. The last idea, this is my constructive idea. Why right to know is important. Within right to know is important because based on that right to know right, you can develop your life and you can make a meaningful society. I think that is end. I don't think right to know itself is important, right? We can make progress, our society and human being based on right to know. That is why we think that is important. But in the context, even if you have a right to know, world is going to be disappeared. I don't think right to know itself is important. I think more important thing, we need to keep in the society, we must make people more happier, not trembling under the fear, he might be dead. Not trembling under the fear because crazy people on the street might kill me. Not trembling under the fear, nobody can remember me because there will be no legacy. Mr. Speaker, under the paradigm of these motions, I think everybody must be happy. But I think government have a responsibility too. Don't make people crazy. Make people need see their families and having a just normal life and they can be happy life other than your policy. For those reasons, I'm very proud to support this.
Thank you, Namchul Kim, for his speech. Now from the opposition, I'd like to call upon the Freedom of Opposition, Takeru Uchiyama.
Substantive, which I would like to add from the negative team, is how by disclosing this information regarding the end of the world is actually going to end conflicts, end tension, and how people will ultimately be able to achieve their individuality, which was the goal of today's feminist side. Before that, I have a lot of response to their case. The major case coming from that side of class was regarding social order. State has a responsibility to hide this particular information in order to keep the security, because some people might react violently. I have 5 points of response to this. Now, first of all, we said the reason why people do not commit crime is not necessarily because it is illegalized, and not necessarily because we have law to prohibit people from doing so. People don't commit crimes, such as rape or murder, because they feel sympathy to the victims that they do so. People don't commit crimes, those kind of crimes, because they would morally regret if they violate those kind of people. So we don't think that just because we disclose this information, that this will somehow lead to chaotic situations, people committing a lot of crime. Second of all, we say that if they violate if there are criminals who would conduct violent activity to other people, and they would that would lead to like increased risk for them people being retaliated by those victims. So if you rape a woman, probably the family of that woman would probably like retaliate against you. So there's a natural disincentive and like deterrence for people not committing crime even after we disclose this information. But third of all, we said that there's a religious reason for people to not commit crime, right? Because people would think that if they would commit crime, if they would commit murder and rape someone, that they would go to hell. And that's a natural disincentive for them to like not commit crime in the first place. But fourth of all, like even if like people, even if it comes to the situation where like as they characterize, police would simply fail to work, we believe that people will like naturally and organically form like certain security force on their own and form vigilantes on their own in order to like keep their security. So we don't think that's necessarily a problem. But fifthly, like even if we can achieve like certain utilitarian benefits such as like security and like public order, we say the state should not use individuals' like right to seek their own meaning or interpretation of life and the end of the world in order to achieve that greater social good. And the reason why that's the case is because states don't own individuals. States shouldn't use people in order to achieve certain social goods, Mr. Speaker. And we believe this is consistent with the principle that we have already in the status quo. Now we say that right after the nuclear power meltdown in Fukushima, like many Japanese people thought that that was actually the end of Japan. They were actually the end of the world and they would necessarily have to die from radiation. But that didn't lead to like mass panic. That didn't lead to people committing violent crime, especially in Japan. Instead, they reacted very calmly. They didn't go and bought up all waters and food in stores. Like they shared those foods and water. They didn't go and commit crimes. Crime rate actually decreased in those kind of areas. We say the important thing that we would like to emphasize is that people's reaction to this particular information is very subjective and it is different from individual to individual. And as we emphasize, we shouldn't like blanketly generalize people's reaction and assume that people react violently and like take policy according to that. We say the people's right to like know this information is particularly important because people have the right to interpret their own like meaning of life or meaning of death, and in order to do so, you need to like in order to achieve that, people need to like know this information at the end is going to end. Before I move on to my substantive, yes.
Okay, people are so rational under the case of they will be dead. Then how can you explain the situations LA riot in 1994 and 2008 France riot about the people?
We accept that there were like certain violent criminals in those cases, but we believe that even in those cases, there were like more number of people who reacted calmly, who reacted peacefully, and you do not have the right to deprive those people's right to seek their own meaning of life and end, just because like there are certain like rare number of criminals. No, thank you. So how do we think that by disclosing this particular information regarding the end of the world, we will be able to like achieve actual like maximize individuality under our paradigm? So we say that in the status quo, we have to accept that there are many conflicts, tensions, wars, clashes of interest between different parties in the world. Now that can be like a very trivial tension, for example, like on an individual level, like you fighting with your girlfriend, but they can also become in a much more social level, like tensions between ethnicity, tensions between religion, tensions between like different political ideology, or they can become even on a national level, like wars being fought between two nations, or like wars against terrorists and those sort of things. Now, the goal of the government was this. Well, it is important to allow people to actualize individuality. The question that I would raise is that how meaningful, how is in the status quo, in the current paradigm, like, are people like meaningfully achieving, like fulfilling their own version of individuality? We see that many people in the status quo are actually prevented from achieving their own individuality because they're too busy like fighting each other. Now, if we do not disclose this information, this conflict will remain. People will keep fighting until the very end of the world. But if we disclose this information, we believe that this actually like leads to achieving, leads to allow individuals to achieve their like own version of individuality. Because when people know that the world is going to end, they would actually have like less incentive to fight each other over trivial issues. Because the reason why people fight each other over like different interests is specifically because they want to achieve their like near future interests. And the reason why I don't know, certain like political like marginalized people want to fight against the government is because they think that by doing so they can achieve certain like benefit in the future, like getting more political sphere. Or like the reason why like nations fight wars with another nation is because they assume that by doing so they can achieve like their interests, like winning the war and getting certain benefit. This is no, thank you. Now we say that when people know that we say that when people know that the world is actually going to end, that means that there's no meaning to fight because because the thing is, there's like no like future interest that they can actually actualize because like the world is going to end. There's like nobody can actualize their own self-interest. So there will be like less incentive to like people fight each other over like trivial issues because they can no longer actualize their own interests. So as a consequence of that, we say that people will be able to like achieve their own like best individuality under our paradigm because they stop like fighting each other with trivial issue and start like praying to their God instead, like seek religious meaning and like try to interpret and find out the meaning of why the world is ending, and therefore like understanding and interpreting the meaning of why the world is ending, therefore achieving their own individuality and achieving like their best interest. And we do not think that just in order to achieve like social like security or public security, those kind of like a utilitarian goal is like a justification enough to deprive these people's right, because that we believe that as they conceded, people's right to seek individuality is that fundamental, and that is why we oppose.